Hey guys, welcome back to the Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is a pro-revenge story. I am not sure if this is pro-revenge, so I will let you all decide. If not, let me know and I will move it. I will say in advance sorry for the long one, but the backstory is relevant. Back in the early 2020s, I started working for a big internet-based company in the UK. The company was opening a new office with a new subdivision in London. When I started, there were two team leaders and the office manager. The two teams were the content team and the SEO, search engine optimization team. I was recruited to be the development team lead, that is, web development. When I was interviewed for the job, both the office manager and SEO team lead were carrying out the interview. As you do in interviews when they asked if this or that could be done, I would respond, yes, of course. Or, you would get a better result doing X, Y, or Z. So, I got offered the job, and for the first year, there was so much going on. As well as building a team, I also had a portfolio of websites that needed to be redeveloped and redesigned. It was at this point that some red flags started to pop up. I would have the SEO team lead, we will call him Devin, coming to me and telling me that I needed to do things the way he wanted. Look, I need these keywords placed exactly where I specified, Devin would insist, leaning over my desk with that condescending look he always had. I would always push back and say no, and give a reason why I was doing things the way I was. That's not how modern web development works, I'd explain. Stuffing keywords like that will actually hurt our rankings. Google's algorithms have evolved past that. Devin would get irate and would complain to the office manager about me. When the office manager would ask me about it, I would explain what had happened and why I had said no, and the office manager would leave it there because at the end of the day, I was the one with the experience in web development, not Devin. This happened a few times over the first year, and I then realized that the reason that Devin was getting so irate was because he thought that I would be a yes man to him. Sorry, buddy, that is not who I am. So, now that we have the backstory, let's get into what led to the revenge. Me and the team had been working hard to get 2 of the new websites completed, and I was due to show them off to the board before they went live. This company's head office was in another part of the country, and I had to leave the office in London at about lunchtime. So, I arrived to the hotel that is across the road from the head office about 4 p.m. and jump on my laptop to start going through the sites to run some tests. I was testing functionality, making sure the look and feel were correct, things like that. Then it happened, we found a major bug that caused a major issue with the functionality of the website. So it is at this point that I am going to introduce the star of our story, Ryan, not real name but attacked all the same, who was my senior developer. Me and Ryan working through the night, me in the hotel room and him in the London office. We finally fixed the bug about 7 a.m. the following day. My meeting with the board was at 10 a.m., so after getting showered, fed, and over to the office, I started my day with 0 hours sleep. I go into the meeting, and the first thing that is said is the CEO asking if I was okay. I had met him a few times, and he was a really nice guy. "You look like you've been through the ringer," he said, genuine concern in his voice. I explained that we had found an issue with the sites yesterday, and me and Ryan had worked through the night to fix it before the meeting. "We discovered a critical bug at the last minute," I told him. "Ryan and I stayed up all night fixing it, didn't want to present anything less than perfect." Long story short, everyone was really impressed and loved the new sites. At the end of the meeting, the CEO pulled me aside and thanked me for everything and then told me to go home and get some sleep. It was about a 3-hour train ride to London and then another hour home. "That kind of dedication is exactly why we brought you on board," he said, patting me on the shoulder. "Go home and rest. You've earned it." I thanked him and went on my way. So, after taking my team out for a well-deserved lunch to say thank you, the office manager then organized a night out for the whole office to celebrate on the following Friday. We started off at a fancy bar, not my sort of thing. I am a man of cheap tastes. And then everyone moves on to a small club. I go to the club for a bit, but then leave quite early in the night as I need to get a train home. I say my byes and then head home. I come into the office on the Monday, and there is something going on. I speak with Olivia, not real name, the content team's lead. She does not know what is going on, but there are people from head office, HR, and others. Then a few minutes later, all the team leaders are called into a meeting. We are all squished in one of the small meeting rooms. There is office manager, 2 members of the HR team from head office, and the 3 team leaders, including myself. So, HR explained that there has been a complaint made against Ryan. A member of the SEO team, we will call him Ajit, had called Devin on the Friday saying that Ryan had been making racist comments while everyone was out at the club. Both myself and Olivia were taken aback. This was not like Ryan. "That doesn't sound like Ryan at all," I said immediately. "He's always been respectful to everyone in the office." Olivia nodded in agreement. "I was there most of the night and didn't hear anything like that. On a side note, I feel that I need to explain the races of people involved." This is just for context and not an attack on anyone involved. Ryan, Olivia, and I are white British. Devon is African, born in Britain, I believe, and Ajit is Indian, once again, I believe. So, the whole day was spent with HR doing interviews with the other people that were there that night, and we then all reconvened towards the end of the day. The result of the interviews were that no one had heard anything like what Ajit was saying, so it was Ajit's word against Ryan's. This was not acceptable for Devon. He wanted Ryan fired and cried, "We cannot have someone like that in the office." "This is a serious accusation," Devon insisted, practically pounding the table. "We have zero tolerance for racism. He needs to go today." So, both Olivia and I looked at each other and thought that it was strange that he was so insistent on firing Ryan with no evidence. Both the office manager and HR agreed, and Ryan was let off with a warning and to be aware in the future of how things he says could be misinterpreted. Life went back to normal in the office, that is until about 2 months later. The story of what had happened had gone round the office, about 12 people. Then one afternoon, I was pulled aside by one of the guys on the content team, and he said that he had overheard Devon and Ajit talking and thought I should know. We went into one of the meeting rooms and he laid everything out. "Look," he said, nervously glancing toward the door. "I heard Devon and Ajit talking in the stairwell last week. They made the whole thing up. The racism complaint, everything. It was all a setup. What I heard made my blood boil, and I think had I been in a cartoon, steam would have been erupting from my ears. He told me that the racism complaint was faked and a plan that Devon had to attack my team because I would not bend to his demands. Him and Ajit were on a call outside the club. Devon was not there that night, and that is when he heard what they were doing. It later came out that their plan was to make the complaint against Ryan and get him fired, which would then lead on to Devon complaining that I was not fit to run a team if I let that sort of thing happen under my leadership. My first question was why he didn't bring this up with HR in the interviews. He said that he did, but it was his word against both Devon and Ajit. I thanked him for this and went on with what I was doing. I was pissed. There was no way that I was going to let this slide, but I knew that if I was going to go after them, I needed to have everything in place beforehand. I didn't tell Ryan what I had been told and asked the guy that told me to keep it to himself for now. I didn't want Ryan to get pissed off and do something that would get him fired or worse, affect any revenge I could dish out. "I appreciate you telling me this," I told him, "but let's keep this between us for now. I need to handle this carefully." So, I watched. I watched everything the SEO team did and didn't do. Then it happened. It was like angels had descended from heaven to deliver me the winning lottery ticket. The building we were in was a 3-story building with a main stairwell with a door on each floor to the offices. The stairwell also led to a door out to the street. At the time, I was a casual smoker and used it to get a break from the screen and clear my head if something I was working on was not going well. So I walk out of the door to the office and into the stairwell, and who is there? Ajit, of all people. He is on the phone, and he goes white as a sheet when he sees me. Now he is mid-sentence with the person on the other end of the phone, and as I am walking past, he is forced to carry on the conversation. "Yes, I understand the enrollment requirements," he was saying nervously. "And how soon can I get the visa paperwork after payment? My current status expires in 3 weeks. I overhear, and from what he is saying, I can tell that he is talking to a school or something like that. The conversation sounding like he was looking for information about applying and about a visa. I thought that was a strange call to be having, and something was fishy about it. I had my suspicions as to what was going on, but nothing concrete at this time. A few days later, I was heading back up to the head office, and by that time, we had a new office manager who lived near the head office, so was based there most of the time. When I got there, I dropped my things off at the hotel and headed over to the office. I went to his desk and asked to have a quick chat. I explained to him what I had overheard Ajit talking about on the phone and said that maybe the company might like to look at his visa status. "I don't want to cause trouble," I said, trying to sound casual, "but I overheard something that made me wonder if Ajit's work authorization is current. Might be worth checking, just to make sure we're compliant." The office manager nodded seriously. "Thanks for bringing this to my attention. I'll have HR look into it discreetly." So, a week went by and nothing seemed to happen. Then bam, he stopped showing up to the office. A few days later, I got told what had happened from one of the other SEO team members. Ajit had been fired with immediate effect for no longer having the correct visa to work in the UK. The company did not want to get involved in sponsoring a new visa for him. I don't know why. I started asking questions around the office, random chit-chat, and I found out that Ajit is from Dubai and he was here on his wife's student visa. I don't know how that works, but it was all above board. I also found out that his wife's course had finished and that left them with a small window of time to get a new visa. That is when it all clicked. Now, there are some dodgy people in London and everywhere else, and they would set up these fake colleges that would sign people up to get visas to live and work in the UK. At some point before or after this, I saw a program on this, and normally these were set up in tiny offices that you couldn't swing a cat in, let alone be a college. They were used as postal addresses for the college. And they would charge a course fee to be enrolled and thus be able to apply for a student visa. So what Ajit was trying to do is to get enrolled in one of these colleges so that he could stay in the UK and carry on working. I found out a few weeks later that Ajit and his wife did have to leave the UK and go back to Dubai because he didn't have any money coming in to pay for his new college course. Bye, Ajit! When I found out that Ajit had been let go, I pulled Ryan aside and filled him in on everything. He could not believe it and was stunned that they would try and do that. "They tried to get me fired just to get at you?" Ryan asked, his jaw practically on the floor. "That's insane. They could have ruined my career with accusations like that." I apologized to him as it was my fault that he had been targeted by them in a way to get at me. He would not accept it and said that I had gone above and beyond in defending him. "Don't apologize," he insisted. "You had my back when it mattered. That's all anyone can ask for in a manager." Following on from this, I made it quite clear to Devon that I knew what he and Ajit had done, and I would not be forgetting it and to watch his back. I made sure we were not in earshot of anyone else. I cornered him in the kitchen one morning when no one else was around. "I know exactly what you and Ajit tried to pull," I said quietly. "If you ever try anything like that again, what happened to him will look like a holiday compared to what comes your way." His face went pale and he muttered something about not knowing what I was talking about before hurrying away. About 2 months later, Devon handed in his notice and left the company, never to be seen or heard from again. I have told this story to some people over the years, and I have been asked so many times if I feel guilty for what I did. I always respond the same way. I feel guilty that Ryan was wrongfully accused and targeted. I don't feel guilty about what I did to Ajit. You don't mess with my friends, family, or team. The next one is an entitled people's story. When I bought my property 3 years ago, I knew exactly what I was getting. 15 acres of pristine land with a natural lake right in the middle, surrounded by old-growth trees and complete privacy. The previous owner had lived there for 40 years and never had any issues with neighbors or the local HOA. The property was grandfathered in before the HOA even existed, which meant I wasn't technically part of their jurisdiction. I paid good money for this slice of paradise, and I had all the legal documents to prove I owned every square inch, including the lake. The trouble started about 6 months ago when the HOA got a new president. This guy moved into the neighborhood with big ideas about community improvement and maximizing property values. Within his first month, he started sending me letters claiming that my lake should be considered a community asset since it was visible from some of the HOA properties. I ignored the first few letters because they were clearly based on wishful thinking rather than any actual legal standing. Then the letters got more aggressive. The HOA president started claiming that since the lake was a natural water feature, it fell under some obscure county ordinance about public waterways. He demanded I provide access to HOA members for fishing, boating, and recreational activities. When I didn't respond to those demands, he escalated things by sending a formal notice stating that the HOA had determined my lake was actually public property that I had been illegally restricting access to. I couldn't believe the audacity. I called my lawyer immediately and had him send a response with copies of my deed, property survey, and water rights documentation. Everything clearly showed that the lake was entirely within my property boundaries and that I owned the exclusive rights to it. My lawyer's letter was polite but firm, essentially telling the HOA to back off or face legal consequences. Most reasonable people would have dropped it at that point. But this HOA president wasn't reasonable. Instead of admitting he was wrong, he doubled down. He started showing up at my property with different HOA board members walking around the perimeter and taking photos. They would stand just on the edge of my property line and point at various features while having loud conversations about public access rights and eminent domain procedures. The situation reached a breaking point 2 months ago when I came home from work to find 20 cars parked along the road near my property. As I drove up my long driveway, I could see a group of people gathered near my lake. They had apparently walked onto my land through the woods and were having some kind of meeting right there on my private property. I parked my truck and walked down to see what was happening. The HOA president was standing on a folding chair addressing a crowd of about 30 people, gesturing toward my lake while talking about community water access initiatives and shared neighborhood resources. Some people had brought folding chairs and coolers. A few kids were already wading into my lake. I approached the group and announced loudly that they were trespassing on private property and needed to leave immediately. The HOA president looked at me with this smug smile and said something about how they had determined that the lake area was actually a public easement that I had no right to restrict. He claimed they were holding an official HOA meeting to discuss the proper management of this community asset. I told him he had exactly 10 minutes to get everyone off my property before I called the police. Instead of backing down, he actually had the nerve to tell me that I was welcome to stay and participate in their productive community dialogue. Several other HOA members started chiming in about how selfish I was being by hoarding a natural resource that could benefit everyone. That's when I realized these people weren't going to respond to reason or legal threats. They had convinced themselves they were in the right, and they were going to keep pushing until someone pushed back harder. I went back to my house and called both my lawyer and the local sheriff's office. The sheriff's deputies who responded were professional, but clearly annoyed at having to deal with what they saw as a neighborhood squabble. They asked to see my property documentation, which I had ready, and then politely informed the HOA group that they were indeed trespassing and needed to leave. The HOA president argued with the deputies for 10 minutes, insisting they didn't understand the legal complexities of the situation, but eventually the whole group packed up and left. I thought that would be the end of it, but I was wrong. Over the next few weeks, the HOA escalated their harassment campaign. They started filing complaints with various county offices, claiming I was violating environmental regulations by restricting access to a public waterway. They filed a formal petition with the County Planning Commission requesting that my property be rezoned to include a public easement around the lake. The most infuriating part was that all these frivolous complaints and petitions cost me money to respond to properly. Even though every single one was eventually dismissed for lack of merit, I had to pay my lawyer to draft responses and attend hearings. I was spending thousands of dollars defending my clearly established property rights against people who had zero legal standing to challenge them. The final straw came 3 weeks ago. I was working in my home office when I heard vehicles pulling into my driveway. I looked out the window and saw not just cars, but a small moving truck. I went outside to investigate and found the HOA president directing a group of people who were unloading tables, chairs, and what looked like catering equipment. When I asked what they thought they were doing, the HOA president handed me an official-looking document. It was a notice stating that the HOA had scheduled an emergency community meeting to discuss the final resolution of the public lake access issue. The meeting was set for the following Saturday and was expected to draw approximately 60 concerned community members. The document claimed that since I had continued to unlawfully restrict access to community property, the HOA was exercising their right to utilize public spaces for community governance activities. They were planning to hold a full HOA meeting on my property, complete with catered lunch and a formal voting session. I told them they had absolutely no right to be on my property and that I would have them arrested if they tried to hold any kind of meeting on my land. The HOA president just smiled and said that their research had shown the lake area qualified as a public space under state regulations, which gave them the right to reasonable use for community activities. At that point, I realized these people were completely detached from reality. No amount of legal documentation or police intervention was going to convince them they were wrong. They had created their own fantasy version of property law and were determined to act on it regardless of the actual facts. But as I watched them unload their equipment, something clicked in my mind. If they truly believed the lake was public property, and if they were so determined to treat it that way, then maybe I should help them experience all the consequences of that belief. I went back inside and spent the rest of the evening researching public property regulations and usage rights. What I found was very interesting. If my lake really was public property as they claimed, then it would be subject to all the same rules and regulations that governed any other public waterway in the county, and those rules were quite extensive. Over the next few days, I made several phone calls to various county and state agencies. I spoke with the Environmental Protection Office, the Public Health Department, the Parks and Recreation Division, and the County Code Enforcement Office. I explained that there was apparently some confusion about whether my lake was public property, and I wanted to make sure I was in full compliance with all applicable regulations for public waterways. The responses were very educational. If my lake was indeed public property, it would need to meet specific safety standards, including marked swimming areas, posted depth warnings, and certified lifeguard coverage during public events. The water quality would need to be tested monthly and the results posted publicly. Any structures within 50 feet of the waterline would require special permits. Public restroom facilities would need to be available within 200 yards of any public access point. Most importantly, any organized gatherings of more than 25 people on public property required advance permits from multiple agencies, including detailed plans for crowd control, waste management, and emergency access. The permit fees alone would cost several $1,000s, and the application process typically took 6 to 8 weeks. I also learned that if my property contained public waterways, it would be subject to regular inspections by various agencies to ensure compliance with environmental and safety regulations. Any violations could result in significant fines and even criminal charges for whoever was considered the responsible party for maintaining the public space. Armed with this information, I made one more phone call to my lawyer. I explained the situation and asked him to draft a very special letter to the HOA. The letter would formally acknowledge their position that my lake was public property and announce my intention to ensure full compliance with all applicable regulations for public waterways. The letter was a masterpiece of malicious compliance. It thanked the HOA for bringing the public nature of my lake to my attention and assured them that I would immediately begin taking steps to ensure the property met all legal requirements for public use. It included a detailed list of all the permits, inspections, and safety measures that would need to be implemented before any public activities could take place. Most importantly, the letter informed the HOA that until all proper permits were obtained and safety measures were in place, I would be temporarily restricting access to the lake area for public safety reasons, as was my responsibility as the adjoining property owner. Any unauthorized gatherings would be reported to the appropriate authorities as violations of public safety regulations. I had my lawyer send copies of this letter not just to the HOA, but also to all the county agencies I had spoken with. Within hours of the letters being delivered, I started getting phone calls from various government offices asking for clarification about the status of my property. The County Code Enforcement Office was particularly interested. They informed me that if there really was confusion about whether my lake was public property, they would need to conduct an immediate investigation. This would involve surveying the property, testing the water quality, and reviewing all relevant documentation to determine the actual legal status. They also mentioned that if someone was planning to hold a 60-person gathering on potentially public property without proper permits, that would be a serious violation that could result in significant fines and even criminal charges for the organizers. The HOA president called me that evening, and for the first time since this whole mess started, he didn't sound smug and confident. He wanted to know why I had contacted all these government agencies and accused me of trying to escalate a simple neighborhood disagreement. I calmly explained that since the HOA had determined my lake was public property, I was simply trying to ensure full compliance with all applicable regulations. When he started backtracking and suggesting that maybe there had been some misunderstanding about the legal status of the lake, I cut him off. I told him that the HOA had made their position very clear through months of letters, complaints, and formal notices. They had stated unequivocally that my lake was public property, and I was now acting accordingly. I also informed him that I had learned about all the permit requirements for public gatherings and that his planned 60-person meeting would be illegal without proper authorization from multiple agencies. Since the permit process took 6 to 8 weeks and cost several $1,000s, I suggested he might want to reconsider his plans. The next morning, I received a frantic call from the HOA secretary asking if we could work something out regarding the upcoming meeting. I politely explained that there was nothing to work out. If they truly believed the lake was public property, then they needed to follow all the rules that applied to public property. If they wanted to hold their meeting as scheduled, they needed to obtain all the proper permits and pay all the required fees. When she started explaining that they didn't have weeks to get permits or thousands of dollars to pay fees, I suggested that perhaps they had been mistaken about the public nature of my lake. If it was actually private property, as I had been claiming all along, then of course they wouldn't need public gathering permits. But in that case, they would need my permission to use my land, which I was not prepared to give. The real chaos started on Friday, the day before their planned meeting. The county sent out inspection teams to examine my property and determine whether any part of it could be considered public land. Environmental protection officers tested my water quality. Code enforcement officers measured distances between my lake and various structures. Health department officials looked for public restroom facilities and waste management systems. By afternoon, there were 6 different government vehicles parked around my property, and officials with clipboards were swarming all over my land. Every single inspection revealed the same thing. My lake was entirely within the boundaries of my private property, and there were absolutely no legal grounds for considering it public land. But the inspections also revealed something else. Since the HOA had formally claimed this was public property and had announced plans for a large public gathering, several agencies were now treating the situation as if there really was a public waterway that needed regulatory oversight. The Environmental Protection Office issued a formal notice requiring immediate water quality testing and certification before any public access could be permitted. The health department cited multiple violations of public facility requirements. Code enforcement identified several safety hazards that would need to be addressed before any organized activities could take place. Most importantly, the county attorney's office determined that the planned HOA meeting constituted an illegal public gathering without proper permits. They issued a formal warning that anyone attempting to organize or participate in the unpermitted event could face fines of up to $5,000 per person plus potential criminal charges. Saturday morning arrived, and I was honestly curious to see what would happen. I had positioned myself on my deck with a cup of coffee and a clear view of my driveway and the lake area. Around 9 a.m., the first HOA members started arriving. Instead of the confident invasion I had witnessed before, these people looked confused and hesitant. They parked along the road and stood around in small groups, clearly unsure about what to do. I could see the HOA president talking animatedly on his phone, probably trying to figure out how to handle the regulatory nightmare he had created. By 10 a.m., there were about 20 cars parked along the road, but no one was setting foot on my property. A few people had unloaded folding chairs from their cars, but they were just standing around holding them instead of setting up for the meeting. Then the county officials arrived. 3 different enforcement vehicles pulled up, and officers with badges and clipboards got out. I watched as they approached the HOA group and began explaining that any gathering on the property would be illegal without proper permits. The HOA president tried arguing with the officials, insisting that they had a right to hold their meeting and that I was somehow manipulating the system to prevent legitimate community activities. The enforcement officers calmly explained that public property regulations existed for everyone's safety and that no exceptions could be made without proper authorization. What happened next was exactly what I had been hoping for. The enforcement officers informed the HOA group that since they had formally claimed my lake was public property, they were now subject to investigation for multiple regulatory violations. The planned unpermitted gathering was just the most obvious problem. The Environmental Protection Officer explained that making false claims about public waterways was a serious offense that could result in significant fines. The Health Department representative mentioned that attempting to organize public events without proper safety measures could lead to criminal liability if anyone was injured. Most devastating of all, the county attorney's office had determined that the HOA's months-long harassment campaign actually constituted a fraudulent attempt to claim public ownership of private property. This could result in both civil and criminal penalties for the organization and its leadership. I watched through my window as the HOA president's face went completely white. He started frantically trying to explain that there had been some misunderstanding and that the HOA had never actually intended to claim my property was public land. But it was too late for backtracking. The county had months of documentation showing exactly what the HOA had claimed and demanded. The enforcement officers spent about an hour taking statements from various HOA members and gathering evidence of their attempted property grab. Several people were issued citations for attempting to organize an unpermitted public gathering. The HOA president received additional citations for filing false claims with government agencies. By noon, the entire group had packed up and left. The elaborate catered meeting they had planned never happened. Instead of celebrating their victory over my selfish HOAing of community resources, they were facing thousands of dollars in fines and potential criminal charges. The aftermath was even more satisfying than the immediate compliance chaos. The county launched a formal investigation into the HOA's conduct, focusing specifically on their fraudulent claims about my property. The Environmental Protection Office fined them for filing false reports about public waterways. The Planning Commission sanctioned them for submitting frivolous petitions based on fabricated legal theories. Most importantly, my lawyer filed a formal complaint with the State Attorney General's office alleging that the HOA had engaged in a coordinated campaign to fraudulently claim ownership of private property. This triggered a broader investigation into the HOA's activities and governance practices. Within 2 weeks of their failed meeting, the HOA president resigned from his position. Facing thousands of dollars in personal fines and potential criminal charges, he apparently decided that community improvement wasn't worth the legal consequences. Several other board members also stepped down rather than deal with the ongoing investigations and liability issues. The new HOA leadership immediately sent me a formal letter of apology and a written acknowledgement that my lake was entirely private property that they had no claim to whatsoever. They also agreed to reimburse me for the legal fees I had incurred defending my property rights against their fraudulent campaign. But the best part of the whole situation was the lasting impact on the HOA's credibility and effectiveness. Word spread quickly throughout the neighborhood about how the previous leadership had tried to steal a neighbor's property and ended up facing criminal charges instead. Property owners who had been considering joining the HOA decided against it. Several existing members resigned rather than be associated with an organization that had engaged in such questionable conduct. The HOA's reputation was so damaged that they struggled to maintain basic operations. They couldn't get enough volunteers to serve on the board. They lost several pending legal cases because potential witnesses refused to testify on behalf of an organization known for fraudulent property claims. Their insurance premiums skyrocketed due to the liability issues created by their previous leadership. Looking back on the whole experience, I'm actually grateful that the HOA pushed things as far as they did. If they had been satisfied with sending a few angry letters and making empty threats, I might have just ignored them and moved on. But by escalating to fraudulent legal claims and actual trespassing, they gave me the opportunity to demonstrate exactly why malicious compliance is such an effective tool against unreasonable authority figures. Their fundamental mistake was assuming they could bully me into giving up my property rights through sheer persistence and intimidation. They thought that if they just kept claiming my lake was public property loudly and aggressively enough, I would eventually cave in and give them what they wanted. Instead, I gave them exactly what they asked for. They claimed my lake was public property, so I made sure it was treated as public property in every possible way. They wanted to hold public meetings on my land, so I made sure they understood all the legal requirements for public gatherings. They demanded access to what they considered community resources, so I helped them discover all the regulations that govern community resource management. The irony is that if they had approached me reasonably from the beginning, I might have been willing to work out some kind of limited access arrangement. I'm not actually opposed to being neighborly or sharing my good fortune with others. But their aggressive, entitled approach made cooperation impossible and malicious compliance inevitable. Now I enjoy my lake in complete peace and privacy, exactly as I intended when I bought the property. The HOA has learned that fraudulent property claims carry serious legal consequences, and I've gained a valuable education in how to use bureaucratic regulations as a weapon against people who think they can ignore property rights and legal boundaries. Sometimes the best way to deal with unreasonable demands is to comply with them so thoroughly and completely that the person making the demands realizes they never actually wanted what they were asking for. The HOA wanted my lake to be public property right up until they discovered what that actually meant in practice. Malicious compliance turned their fantasy of community control into a regulatory nightmare that cost them thousands of dollars and destroyed their credibility. I still see the former HOA president around the neighborhood occasionally. He won't make eye contact with me anymore, which is probably for the best. I hear he's moved on to other community improvement projects, but apparently with a much better understanding of property law and the importance of proper permits. As for my lake, it remains exactly what it always was, a beautiful private retreat on my own land where I can fish, swim, and relax without worrying about unwanted visitors or fraudulent property claims. The only meetings held here now are the ones I choose to host, and the only community activities involve the wildlife that naturally calls this place home. The whole experience taught me that sometimes the most effective response to unreasonable people isn't to fight them directly, but to help them get exactly what they're demanding until they realize they should have been more careful about what they wished for. The next one is an entitled People Story. I've always cherished the beautiful environment surrounding my home, particularly the magnificent landmark trees that dot the landscape. These trees, deemed essential for preserving the fragile ecosystem due to the abundant rainfall and hilly terrain, held a special place in my heart. They not only prevented erosion, but also provided shelter to countless creatures. However, my neighbor, with his distorted concept of personal boundaries, posed a constant threat to my property and the precious trees that adorned it. His misguided notion of greater good often led him to trespass onto my land and meddle with things without seeking my consent. Although occasionally his actions proved beneficial, such as pulling weeds near our shared property line, I made it clear that I did not condone his behavior. I urged him to approach me with any concerns or suggestions he might have rather than trespassing. Until that fateful incident, I regarded him as merely eccentric, never suspecting the lengths he would go to in pursuit of his misguided desires. It all began with his fixation on a particular tree situated on my property. According to him, the tree obstructed his view and cast excessive shade, thus causing harm to his beloved flowers. To my bewilderment, he had opted to plant the flowers in an area with limited sunlight, instead of utilizing other parts of his backyard. When I informed him that the tree was a landmark and legally protected, I expected him to understand and move on. Little did I know that his obsession with the tree would consume him. Every encounter thereafter involved him incessantly questioning me about plans to remove the tree or offering assistance in its removal. Despite reiterating my stance that the tree would remain untouched, except for necessary pruning, it seemed as though he heard an entirely different message. And then, one morning, I awoke to the unmistakable sound of a chainsaw. Rushing outside, my heart sank as I beheld the remnants of what was once a majestic tree. Caught in the act, my neighbor stood there, chainsaw in hand, grinning with a twisted sense of accomplishment. He had audacity to instruct me to clear away the logs and eradicate the unsightly stump, all while casually trespassing through a hole he had callously created in my fence. My fury knew no bounds, and I wasted no time reporting him for trespassing and destruction of my private property, a designated landmark. I sought compensation for the costs of hiring professionals to restore my yard and remove the stump, refusing to spend a single cent on his malicious act. Confident in my knowledge of tree law, I knew justice would be on my side. Recent cases in the area had demonstrated a strict stance against such transgressions. Both of us faced rigorous questioning regarding the tree's health, potential threats to nearby homes, and any evidence of instability. My neighbor, however, had no grounds to support his claim since there was nothing wrong with the tree. His feeble argument of the tree killing his flowers crumbled under scrutiny. According to the tree law, he was liable for triple the estimated cost of the landmark tree. While I couldn't keep the entire sum, as the town used a portion to replant an equivalent tree on my property, the remaining funds were rightfully mine. The judge made it clear that I must use the money to clear the space where the previous tree stood, making room for the new one. Consequently, I couldn't sue him for additional compensation for cleanup costs, as it fell under his financial obligations. In the end, he was ordered to pay a staggering $200,000 to the court for the destruction of the landmark. Regarding trespassing and the damaged fence, he received a mere warning. I opted not to pursue a restraining order, sensing that his face betrayed his realization that such actions would have severe consequences. As for the fence, he had 90 days to repair it, subject to inspection. The satisfaction I derived from witnessing his reaction to the court's decision was immeasurable. It served him right, considering the countless times I had explicitly informed him of the law. Word got around that he had taken out a second mortgage to gather the funds necessary to fulfill his obligations. The new tree, planted near the original spot, cast its comforting shade over that part of his yard once more, despite his ill-conceived efforts. While I didn't acquire a substantial financial windfall from the incident, my priority lay in the restoration of the environment. At the end of the day, I invested the remaining funds in a modest security system to monitor my property, ensuring that my neighbor would face the full weight of the law if he ever dared to trespass again. The next one is a pro-revenge story. When I got divorced, my alcoholic wife of 18 years had started another affair, this time with her addiction counselor. My lawyer and I laid a trap for them, just in case you don't know. Intimate relations between a counselor and a patient are very frowned upon by the regulatory bodies. And I was more than pissed after putting her through rehab, which cost $25,000 and I didn't have to do, only to have her fall back into her old behavior. Shortly before the divorce was finalized, I filed a complaint with the state body licensing health professions. Knowing they were in some peril because of their unprofessional relationship, I had already gotten him fired from a major teaching hospital. She had backed off her exorbitant demands. I paid her a very modest settlement, kept the house, got custody of the 3 tweenage kids, and received child support. Her lawyer naturally included a clause in the divorce where I had to agree to not say anything negative about her lover and their relationship. But the lawyer messed up and never asked if I had already filed charges and thus didn't require me to rescind them. Her lawyer had assumed I was just bad-mouthing them to neighbors and friends, and it never occurred to the lawyer that we were doing much more. When the Board of Health Professions responded to my complaint shortly after the divorce was finalized, I told them that it would take a subpoena to get me to testify. A subpoena trumps an agreement in a divorce settlement. They were happy to oblige. They stripped his license and placed him on a register of sanctioned health professionals. He never worked again. They were broke in a handful of years, and she divorced him when the money ran out. In the meantime, his mother had died, leaving a fair-sized estate, so it took longer than I expected. Oh, and the icing on the cake was that his wife and I traded notes, notably hotel receipts from the time of their affair, that helped each of us in our respective divorces. Justice was served. The next one is a petty revenge story. This happened when I had only just moved from home and got my own place. I was super proud of myself as I had saved like a demon and bought, with a mortgage obviously, my first place. It was a lovely little 2-bedroom flat in a slightly rough area, but I loved it, and it was all mine. My mom and stepdad came to visit for a few days, a few months after I was settled in. The flat was nicely decorated in my style with all my own furniture. One of the evenings they stayed, I had to work a late shift. They planned to go out for dinner and to the pub, so I left them to it. I came home at 11 p.m. and my mom had moved nearly all of the furniture around. All my books and kitchen stuff were moved to different shelves or cupboards. She even moved my bed in my room, so when I opened the bedroom door it hit the bed. I was pissed. So I angrily fixed what I could that night before going to bed. I spoke to her about it the next day and explained that it was my home and I had it how I liked it, so please stop. I put everything else back, which took hours. She grumbled the whole time, insisting that it looked better her way. On their last day, I nipped out to the shops to get us some nice bits for lunch, and in the hour I was gone, she had done it again. She had moved all my kitchen stuff around to where she liked it. Again, I told her off, stating that it was my house and my rules. She still maintained that it was better her way and that I should just let her crack on. Fine, I let her do what she wanted and put stuff back when they left. My revenge came when I went to visit their house 6 months later. While she was out at work one day, I rearranged every bit of furniture I could by myself. Everything. I swapped the dining room and living room furniture over so that you had to walk through the living room and across the hallway to get to the dining room. I swapped their bedroom and guest room curtains over. The windows were different sizes, so their new bedroom curtains were 2 feet too short. I even did pointless little things like moving the spoons to a different side of the drawer and moving every photo on the walls to a different wall. I rearranged the fridge as well. It took me 7 hours. My stepdad was home while I did it and laughed his head off the whole time. He refused to help but understood, so he let me crack on. Neither my stepdad nor I said anything when she got home. We just sat watching TV, which was now in what was their dining room, and I asked her how work was. She didn't say a word. She walked around the house, taking it all in for 20 minutes. Then she came and sat down, looked at me and said, "Point taken." They put it back to how it was the next time I visited. We haven't spoken of it since. The next one is a petty revenge story. My husband of 25 years decided he wanted to split up. I unsuccessfully begged him to change his mind and spent many nights crying on the bathroom floor. One thing to note is that I carried the health insurance for the family. He is self-employed. When he wouldn't change his mind, we filed for legal separation, and he moved out. In the meantime, I got a fantastic new job that covers 100% of the health and dental insurance premiums for the entire family, with a $100 deductible. Sweet. He is still allowed to be on my insurance since we are legally separated rather than divorced, and it costs me nothing to have him on my insurance. But I am petty as hell, so I charge him $400 a month for something that costs me $0. Of course, he is welcome to get insurance on his own in the marketplace, which would probably cost at least twice that amount for an equivalent policy. I make sure he knows it costs me nothing, nada, zip, to have him on my insurance and that his $400/month payment is funding my upcoming trip to Spain. If you have a legal separation, getting a divorce in my state is just a matter of filing a form and paying $60. If I did that, he couldn't be on my insurance anymore, so he is basically paying me $400 a month not to file for divorce after not wanting to be married anymore. I love it. The next one is a malicious compliance story. When I was at the university, a friend landed a part-time job doing networking for a really small company, and asked me if I wanted in, because he also had other customers, and was worried he wouldn't be able to handle them all. It was easy money, 12 hours per month, to basically maintain the network infrastructure, upgrade firmware on routers, check logs, run antivirus software, and install some software on computers. So I said yes. The company used to fix and sell printers and printer-related stuff. It was run by two ladies who were friends, let's call them May and June, but the CEO in function was May's husband, let's call him CEO Peter, who was also June's husband's best friend. The rest of the company consisted of accountant Peter, who shared the name with the CEO, some technicians who were never there, and two hard-working sales representatives. Basically, the accountant, technicians, and sales reps were the only ones doing work there. Even though May and June were also technically sales reps, they hardly ever made a call. May spent all day browsing the internet for things to buy. Her thing was shoes. June spent all day chatting with another guy, not her husband, who also shared the name with the CEO, let's call him Third Peter, and CEO Peter spent all day watching porn. Yes, at work. May appeared to have no problems with CEO Peter's habits. I spent most of the time there trying to clean CEO Peter's computer from the myriad of viruses that he would install by browsing sketchy sites, and even when I complained a lot about it to him, he said that he didn't know why there were so many viruses and kept doing it every single day. The place was full of drama, and after a while, my friend and I would pretend to have work to do there and spend time there just for the laughs. One day, May approached me furious, saying that she caught one of the sales reps browsing the internet instead of making calls. She wanted to disable the internet for the reps. I checked the logs and found that the rep had browsed the specs of one of the machines she was selling, a newer model she wasn't familiar with. So, cue malicious compliance. I disabled the internet for the whole company. About 2 minutes later, May, June, and CEO Peter came running to the server room, shouting about what the hell was happening to their internet. The accountant and sales rep pretty much never realized something had changed because they were hard at work. I told them that May made me do it. She said, but just for the reps. And I told them some story about not being able to block a specific IP because they were assigned dynamically. So they were about to change, and blah blah blah. CEO Peter was red as a tomato. He demanded to reinstate the internet for everyone. I looked at June. She nodded. I looked at May. She said, "Are you sure you can't just do it for them?" I said no. She exhaled. Okay then, the internet is back up for them. The next one is an entitled People Story. This incident happened around 2005 at Marshall's Creek Flea Market in Pennsylvania. A mother and her son, approximately 10 years old, were walking by my booth when the kid stopped. He noticed a box of single cards and started looking through them. The mother told the kid to put it down, saying they didn't have time for him to browse. Clearly the kid had had enough, and he said to her, "We always seem to have time for you to look at everything, but when I want to look, we don't have time." I instantly liked this kid, but she gave him a glare that suggested he would face consequences later. He asked me about the price of the cards, and I informed him they were 25 cents each. As he went through them, he paused and asked if a particular card was also a quarter. I examined it and unintentionally muttered, "Shoot!" It turned out to be a rookie A-Rod card, before his steroid scandal became public knowledge. She looked at it and said, "I wouldn't sell that for that price." Here's what happened. When I left my house to set up the market that weekend, I accidentally grabbed the card and placed it in my singles tray, intending to transfer it to my showcase. I know some readers may find it hard to believe that I sold it, but I did. I explained that it was my mistake, and I always try to honor my word to kids. Adults usually understand that mistakes happen. She then told the boy to put it back, and they would think about it and return later. Keep in mind, we're talking about a mere quarter. I said to her, "Ma'am, I'm doing this to keep my word to your son. This is a one-time offer. If you decline or walk away, I'll put this card in a snap-tight card holder, attach a $50 price tag to it, and display it in my showcase." She instructed the kid to put it back, claiming that she wouldn't be pressured. Remember, it's just a quarter. The kid became upset and started arguing. Then the troublesome mother declared, "Talking back, now you're not getting anything." At this point, the kid lost control, while the mother stood there with her arms folded, wearing a smug smile as if she had won the 7th game of the World Series. What she and I didn't know was that the father was approaching and witnessing the aftermath of her actions. He inquired about the situation. and she informed him that she was punishing the kid for talking back. He then started lecturing the boy about his behavior and so on. I couldn't allow this poor kid to be punished for her actions, so I spoke up. I said, "Sir, you should really know what happened." The mother yelled at me, "Mind your goddamn business." I responded, "It is my goddamn business. You caused a scene at my stand and drove away customers." A bit of an exaggeration, but whatever. Then she made a mistake and stated that he didn't need to know what happened. The father said, "Maybe he does." The father took the kid outside to the parking lot, and I could see him crouch down and place his hand on the boy's shoulder. Meanwhile, the mother was screaming at me. I removed the card box from the table and placed it beside me because I was afraid she would tear it up. Yes, this kind of thing has happened before. A few minutes later, they both returned, and the father asked me what had happened. I recounted the incident to him. He looked at her and told her that our stories matched. So unless the kid had sneaked away and we had planned this, she was responsible. He then asked her why. Her response? She didn't want him to have it. When asked why not, her answer was that she didn't need a reason. The father reached into his pocket for change, and I informed him that I wasn't going to sell it for that price anymore. However, I would if Mommy Dearest paid for it. Yes, I was rubbing it in. She shouted that there was no way she would give me anything. The father asked, "How much?" I suppose he was expecting the book price. I said 26 cents, but if you don't have a penny, you can owe it to me. As I started putting the card into a top-loader card holder, this insane woman actually tried to jump over my table to grab the card. She was screaming that she had said no, and how dare I sell it to him. A crowd gathered, and my neighbor explained to curious onlookers what had happened. Most of them laughed at her for being foolish. I handed the card to the father, and she continued screaming that she would tear it up at the first opportunity. The father told her that she wouldn't because he would put it in the safe at his office. I hope this woman receives the therapy she needs. And I can only imagine what she would have done if it had been 50 cents. The next one is an entitled parent story. I, 27F, had an older brother, 25M, who died in 2014. He was the kind of older brother any girl wanted, and we were close. He taught me valuable life lessons such as cooking, driving, and never giving up. He introduced me to anime and manga, and we would often go on little road trips. We even ignored our parents' favoritism towards my younger brother. Sadly, he died when a shooting occurred. He wasn't involved in any illegal activity, he was simply eating when it happened. An investigation took place and the police confirmed his innocence. He was only 25 at the time, and I was 19. I would be lying if I said I didn't fall into a deep depression. It reached a point where I stopped eating and lost around 55 pounds in just a month and a half after his passing. During that time, I only drank water and milk to fill myself up. I didn't want to get better until one day my former sister-in-law called me to inform me that he had left me some things. I met up with her, and the items he left behind included an album filled with Polaroid pictures of our crazy adventures, graphic anime tees, and a chain with both of our initials. Overwhelmed with emotion, I decided to seek help because he would have wanted to see me happy instead of consumed by sadness. It has been years since his passing, and I'm doing much better now. I have a tradition on his birthday where I visit his grave and leave flowers. I only stay for 2 minutes before singing him happy birthday, and then I leave. My therapist thinks it's a good idea. However, my parents, 50M and 59F, younger brother, 22M, and aunt, 52F, decided to stage an intervention, firmly believing that what I was doing was satanic. They thought I was trying to communicate with the dead, and insisted that I should have thrown away the things he left me. They even suggested I attend their church to rid myself of these diabolical ideas. I was shocked, and told them that I wouldn't stop this tradition, and that I had no intention of going to their church. I reminded them that this was about their older son, and if they continued to behave this way, I wouldn't hesitate to cut off contact with them. They continued to yell at me, and my aunt even went so far as to throw holy water at me. I had reached my limit and told them that we could talk when they stopped being religious fanatics. As of today, I want nothing to do with them. I left before any of them could say anything, and it has been a week since the incident. I have blocked their numbers. I have just freed myself from toxic family members, and I have no intention of returning to that environment ever again.
The next one is an entitled people story.
I have lived in various neighborhoods, encountering all sorts of eccentric neighbors. but the one living next to me may take the prize for being the most insane. His erratic behavior and penchant for hurling insults at people were well known in our community. While it appeared as though he had some loose screws, it turned out he didn't have a diagnosed mental illness. He was simply unhinged and acted out intentionally. Considering his outrageous actions in this story, I am confident in labeling him as the worst neighbor in Bratislava, Slovenia. Just like any place, the rule in our neighborhood was clear. People couldn't trespass onto your property without permission. If you asked them to leave, they had to comply. Otherwise, they risked getting arrested. One fateful day, my neighbor took it upon himself to step onto my property and launch a tirade against me. He berated the appearance of my lawn due to the built-in sprinklers, claiming it would affect his own lawn negatively. To make matters worse, he targeted my wife's beautifully planted flowers, spewing venomous insults. That was the breaking point for my wife, who firmly told him to back off and leave us alone. This only fueled his rage, and he declared that he wouldn't leave the property until he had harmed my wife. Fearing for her safety, I quickly ushered her inside the house, ensuring the door was locked, and dialed emergency services. I had no clue what this unstable neighbor was truly capable of, but I was determined to keep him away from my wife at any cost. When the police arrived, they escorted us into the house, away from the neighbor's presence. We explained the situation, emphasizing his refusal to leave our property and the threat he posed to my wife's life. Little did we know that this was just the beginning, and things were about to escalate into sheer madness. To our surprise, the police had dispatched only 2 officers in a single patrol car. As a result, our unhinged neighbor was left unsupervised outside, and he decided to take things to a whole new level of insanity. He retrieved a rope, seemingly from his garage, and proceeded to tether the police car to his own vehicle. One of the officers noticed the bizarre scene unfolding and saw their patrol car being dragged away by our neighbor. I couldn't comprehend the thoughts racing through his deranged mind, but his actions clearly indicated that he had lost touch with reality. Later on, he was subjected to a mandatory psychiatric evaluation, which he sorely needed. When we witnessed this spectacle, we all rushed outside, realizing that the officers were less concerned about the trespassing and more focused on the fact that their car was being stolen. They commanded the neighbor to exit the vehicle, and to everyone's astonishment, he complied. Given his history of being uncontrollable, I had anticipated him driving away without a care. However, he surprisingly obeyed the officers' orders, albeit reluctantly. The perplexed officers promptly called for backup, realizing they were dealing with an unprecedented situation. As the neighbor stepped out of the stolen police car, it became evident only when he drew nearer that he was brandishing a knife, sprinting toward one of the officers with malicious intent. It was inconceivable that this maniac would attempt to attack a police officer simply because he wouldn't let him steal the car. Fortunately, no one was harmed as the other officer swiftly retrieved his taser and fired it, incapacitating our neighbor. Unlike in other parts of the world, firearms aren't the immediate resort for the police in our country. The assailant lay on the ground, subdued, while a collective sense of confusion enveloped the scene. Another police car arrived, and our unhinged neighbor was swiftly confined in the back, en route to his arrest for the attempted assault on a police officer, attempted car theft, trespassing, and wielding a deadly weapon. Considering the knife he had and the severity of his threats against my wife, the charges against him were substantial. Given his behavior, it was clear that he needed a comprehensive evaluation to determine his mental state and whether he was fit to stand trial. Surprisingly, the evaluation results indicated that he was mentally stable. This was a stark contrast to the belligerent and unhinged individual we had witnessed previously. In court, he appeared as a completely different person, comprehending the gravity of his actions and lacking a substantial defense. Although traces of drugs were detected in his system, it was speculated that they might have influenced his altered state of mind. Nevertheless, he was held fully accountable for his deeds, and antagonizing the police was unquestionably unwise. People regarded the police as heroes, and assaulting an officer for no reason wouldn't bode well for anyone. Our neighbor was destined for a lengthy prison sentence for his assault on the officer and theft of the police car. The question arose regarding the initial events that led to the police being called. A man of his stature brandishing a weapon and threatening a woman never looked good. Trespassing was the least of his concerns at that point. Instead, he received an additional 2 years in jail. in addition to the 5 he was already sentenced to for the assault and theft charges. When someone is arrested for separate offenses, there are 2 possible approaches: serving the sentences concurrently, resulting in a total of 5 years, or serving them consecutively, which would entail 7 years of imprisonment. The court decided on the latter, ensuring he paid the price for each crime individually. There may be countless tales of eccentric neighbors out there, but I have yet to come across one more extreme than this. I'm relieved that he is currently behind bars, and I sincerely hope he won't return to our neighborhood. The absence of his incessant yelling has restored peace to our lives, and I can only hope that he learns to control himself in the future. Whether he requires assistance for drug addiction or simply needs to exhibit better self-restraint, he has 7 long years to contemplate and make changes. However, I have a strong inclination that he won't be residing next to me once he regains his freedom. The next one is a pro-revenge story. This happened years ago, 1985 to be exact. I was 45 when this happened, 81 now. So after my second retirement, I started doing property management. I bought this 2,500 square foot luxury home with the sole intention of renting it out. Now, I didn't know how bad the homeowner association was, but when I became the owner, I soon found out. This all took place in a span of 2 years. Karen would literally have a problem with everyone in the neighborhood. Trash cans left out? Fined. Loud music after 10 p.m.? Fined. Yard sale without permission? Fine. Removing dead plants and replanting without approval? You get fined. It went on and on like this. Now the community could run for the homeowner association board, but the homeowner association board chose the president. 6 out of the 10 members on the board liked Karen, so she always kept her job. Her husband was in the medical field, so he made a lot of money. It got to a point where she was called Queen Karen in the neighborhood due to her dishing out homeowner association fines. I used to go in person to collect the rent because the people who rented my house were good friends of mine. I did this for months. So I would park my car in front of the garage. My friends and I were having some music on, but it wasn't that loud. Queen Karen came over driving her golf cart and said, "Queen Karen, excuse me?" Me, "Yeah?" Queen Karen, "You have to turn that music down, it's too loud." I told her that it was 8 p.m. and that even loud music can be played until 10. She wasn't having it and demanded that I do so. Now my friends and I kept the music going and we were enjoying ourselves. She proceeded to get angry and fined me. Now most people would just take the abuse and pay the fine, but not me. I went to the homeowner association board, contested the fine, and won. From that point on, Queen Karen made it her personal mission to destroy me. She would idiot and fuss about every little thing. I fought what I could, but I did end up paying for some of it. She also went after my tenants, which made things worse for me. I had a sit-down with my friends one night to discuss the problem. When I parked my car, Queen Karen came over in her robe and said I had to park somewhere else. I did because I didn't want to start anything. We saw her go back into her house and embrace a man who isn't her husband. We were being noisy, and we came to the conclusion that she was cheating on her husband. Spoiler alert, she was. My friends and I told Queen Karen's husband. I'm sure he did some investigation because 3 months later they divorced and he was moving his stuff out. Now gossip said that Queen Karen got nothing because she was the one that cheated and she didn't have a job, so she wasn't entitled to the money. From this point on, Queen Karen had a massive decline in the quality of life that she had. She sold her car and got a cheaper one, and she adopted different dressing habits. But even after the divorce, she never got a job, and she was still living somewhat better than everyone else. Fast forward to 1986 in February, Queen Karen and the Homeowner Association had been giving out fines for very obscure things and increased monthly dues. Having trash cans out a couple of hours early, or after the trash man left, would result in a fine. Targeting people that had older or dirty cars went on and on. The other people in the community and I were sick of the crap that she and the Homeowner Association were pulling. So at the next meeting, we made our voices heard and voiced our concerns. Queen Karen said that the community had been falling behind on repairs, and that the dues and increase in fines were necessary, especially if people weren't maintaining their own property. She said that it was in the yearly budget report and that we should have read it. The other pissed residents and I went and read the statement. None of us had read it because we took it as junk mail and disregarded it. But we read the whole statement cover to cover. Queen had increased the Homeowner Association budget by 15%, and where that extra money was going remained unknown. We went over to her house the next day and demanded to know where the extra money was being spent, but she refused several times. She closed the door and went back to watching TV. We filed a joint lawsuit to find out where the money was going. In June, we found out, cue the revenge, Queen Karen was living off homeowner association fines and dues. The increase was because she was running out of money. She still didn't have a job, so she embezzled from the homeowner association so she wouldn't have to get a job. She got busted. We called the police for her embezzling the money. She was charged with fraud and extortion. The neighbors and I filed a joint lawsuit against Karen to get reimbursement as well. Because she had no money, she had to mortgage her house to pay us all. She later went to federal prison for 6 years with no parole. Because she went away, no one was paying on her house. The bank foreclosed on it and it was bought by someone else. So when she got out in 1992, she was homeless. Honestly, the majority of us didn't want to ruin her life like this. Had she toned down the excessive fines, we would have let her be. But she had to double down and steal from us because she didn't want to get a job like everyone else. The next one is a petty revenge story. Might be a little long, so I apologize. So for a bit of context, I, 24F, used to work at a sandwich shop named after a public transportation system in my hometown when I was 19. One day, my manager and I were working a shift together after the lunch rush had ended. She was mostly confined to the back, balancing the safe and washing dishes, while I handled cleaning the front of the house and the line. I noticed a woman approaching the store and quickly made my way behind the line to wash up. She entered with her phone pressed to her ear, and I was already on edge because of that alone. Customers who refuse to get off the phone to communicate their order are always difficult to deal with. I welcomed her and asked what I could get for her. She curtly replied, "A turkey sandwich," then turned back to her phone. Throughout the time I tried to take her order, she made rude and snarky comments about my occupation, saying things like, "Just make the damn sandwich, how hard can that be? I swear you're all so stupid, it's hard to believe you have jobs." I was irritated, but continued to smile, although I could no longer force it to reach my eyes. I asked her what dressing she would like, and she simply said, "Mustard," refusing to answer whether she wanted regular, spicy, or honey mustard. So I just put regular mustard on it after she angrily told me to stop asking stupid questions. I finished making the sandwich, rang up her order including the sandwich and drink, and hoped she would leave after she was done. Nope. She finished 2/3 of her sandwich and came stomping back to my register, slamming the sandwich on the counter and incessantly ringing the bell to get my attention. I set down the prep I was doing, put on the best smile I could muster, and returned to my register. She yelled at me, demanding that I remake her sandwich for free because she had clearly asked for honey mustard. And I had put the wrong mustard on her sandwich to spite her. My manager intervened, having heard everything from me making this lady's sandwich to that point. She came up behind me and saw that the woman had eaten the majority of the sandwich. She told the woman that she seemed satisfied with the sandwich and refused to remake it. The woman then picked up her sandwich and threw it at me. Luckily, it only landed on my jeans and apron, but my manager said she needed to leave or she would call the police. The lady continued to argue, claiming that her sandwich was now ruined and we needed to remake it for her. My manager pushed me behind her and told me to go finish my prep. I was just on the other side of the wall and could hear everything. Since my manager's boyfriend was a cop, she pulled out her phone, called him, and started telling him how one of her employees had just been assaulted by a horrible customer. I had met him several times, and he was an awesome guy. Well, this scared off the customer, and we went about our day-to-day duties. I ended up quitting a few months later when one of my coworkers thought it would be funny to touch me with a cookie tray she had just pulled out of the oven. Fast forward to a couple of months ago. I went to that same shop because I was in the area and felt like having a sandwich. I did a double take when I saw the same woman behind the counter, and it seemed like she recognized me because she had a shocked expression. We went through the motions of making my order, and at the register, I gave her a big smile as I dropped a $5 bill into the tip cup and said, "I hope you have a blessed day." She turned red hot in the face when I did this and tried to say something, but my old assistant manager came out front. He saw me and got excited, starting to talk about his promotion and his wife. When the woman went into the back, my friend started laughing about how he could hear the pettiness in my voice from the back. He said he had to see the look on my face, and that our old manager would have been proud. My manager now works a decent-paying job and married her cop boyfriend. I also work a decent job, and luckily, I don't have to deal with customers at this one. Even though I would have loved to do something truly petty, I refuse to stoop to her level. I've heard kill 'em with kindness my entire life when someone wrongs me, so I decided to try that approach, especially since I know how rough it can be to work in customer service. I didn't want to cause this woman the same level of stress and anxiety she caused me. The next one is a malicious compliance story. Now, before I start, here's a bit of context for this situation. I work in the boat industry as an engine tech and parts painter. I know, quite a broad range right there. Anyway, the company I work for is quite old, and the building I work in is even older. The heating system is trash, and we really lack anything in the way of air conditioning, and it's boiling outside right now. Earlier today, I started overheating really quickly as the temperature rose in the building. I have a medical condition where my body can't regulate temperature well, meaning I am at risk of passing out. I was going to get a bottle of water from the fridge to help me cool down when I was stopped by one of the company's managers. Let's call him Kyle for this story. Kyle, where are you going? Me. I was only going to get some water. Kyle, you're supposed to be working right now. You can get the water during the coffee break. Me. I don't think you understand that I can actually be in danger from this heat right now. So, could I please go get one bottle of water? Kyle. No. You're not authorized to leave your work before the clock strikes. Now shut up and get back to work. Me. Roger that. Keep in mind that this conversation was held in front of my coworkers. Cue malicious compliance. I got back to work, making sure to put on some extra coal just to make sure I made up for lost time. Basically, I was forcing my body into shock, and heat stroke was just around the corner. Fast forward around 30 minutes, I had to tell my coworkers through my strained breath that I don't feel too good. It was even worse now as I was working on the deck of one of these boats, give or take 3 meters above the floor. When I made my way towards the ladder to climb down, I only managed to say, "Oh crap," as I fell off the back and headed straight for the concrete floor below me. Luckily for me, some coworkers reacted fast enough and managed to catch me before my head split open on the floor. I woke up in an ambulance around an hour later. The EMTs were checking my vitals and actually helping me. My boss came up to the door and asked me what happened. I told him exactly as I told you guys, and I also told him to check with my coworkers if he didn't believe me. Long story boring, I was taken to the hospital for a checkup just to make sure I didn't suffer any kind of trauma from the fall. A buddy of mine came with me to make sure I got there and back safely. A few hours passed and my buddy got a call. He picked it up and it was Kyle. My buddy handed me the phone and I heard Kyle on the other end apologizing for almost getting me killed. The short version is that he was heavily reprimanded for what he told me and was put on watch. He didn't lose his position though, so I guess I didn't fully win, but he was liable for the medical compensation for my situation. I did forgive him, and just to rub it in a bit, I had to ask him, "Am I authorized to get water next time?" And my buddy just laughed. The next one is an entitled People Story. Background. I used to exclusively sell cell phones inside a middle-class retail chain. This service was actually run by a different company than the retail chain itself. We would provide all of the nicer cell phones, iPhones and Samsung Galaxies, $800, $1,500, and the retail chain provided the cheaper prepaid cell phones. My team and I would sell all of the phones, but only we could sell the nicer phones. At the time of this incident, I was the team lead for my store, meaning that when it came to the nicer cell phones, I had the final word. We never discounted the phones directly, but various service providers would authorize rebates and incentives, and that was it. When you bought a nicer phone from us, we would directly pull up your service provider account and set up the phone, and they would provide any discounts, credits, or rewards. We were also able to report fraud through this system. The story: it was a slow day at the cell phone station, so I decided to do a cold sail lap of the store, leaving a newer team member. Let's call her Tina, in charge of the cell phone area for the 30 minutes it would take to find someone to buy a phone. I was gone maybe 10 minutes before I got a call from the store manager asking me to get back to the cell phone station because there was an issue. When I got back, I saw Tina about to cry while an overweight Karen was holding a small piece of paper and yelling at her. As I got closer, I heard the word coupon, and I immediately knew what was about to go down. Less than a week ago, Tina had accepted several fake coupons, my day off and her partner called out without telling me, and severely discounted the nicer phones with the fake coupons. She was new, and we hadn't covered that she could never discount the phones herself, nor that we never had coupons for these. Afterwards, I made it clear to her that our team would never discount the phones. Cut back to the present, I saw the store manager watching from around the corner. I waved him off and strode forward. Facing Tina, I asked what was going on. Tina let me know that the Karen wanted the newest iPhone and was trying to use a 99% off coupon. Before she could continue, the Karen cut in. I don't know what the issue is. She accepted these coupons last week from my friends. Karen then pushed the coupon towards Tina, as if that would magically change the situation. I told Tina to take an extra 15 in the back and then turned back to the Karen. I was pissed, and I think it was showing just a bit because Karen flinched. While I hadn't been in too much trouble over the coupon issue the week prior, I had been passed over for a promotion to another store because of it, and I was not in the mood. Not only was she basically trying to steal a phone, but she had specifically targeted Tina. Who told you that Tina would accept this ridiculously fake coupon? Was it Kathy? We had records for the nicer phones, and Kathy's account was banned from every one of our locations because of the prior incident. Karen became pale at the last question, and I think she realized that she was in trouble. She tried to mention something about the retail chain accepting these types of coupons, and I laughed. I explained that the retail chain didn't have any say over the nicer phones, and that we worked for a different company. She tried to insist that we had already taken these coupons before, so why couldn't she use them now? At this point, I was done and told her in no uncertain terms that we would never discount the nicer phones, and that she would not be purchasing phones from this location, period. Fortunately for me, the store manager had hung around and I called him over. Can you call asset protection? I picked up the coupon and handed it to him. Using a fake coupon is stealing, and this woman also knows Kathy from last week. Karen tried to run, but we were lucky that the police were already at the entrance for an entirely separate issue. I heard later that Karen did get past them initially, but the police were informed of the situation and were able to detain Karen before she made it to her car, and then arrested her. Unfortunately, I don't know what happened after that, but I did give a statement about this incident 2 weeks later to the police, so I think charges were filed.
The next one is an entitled People Story.
I still remember the day I moved into my home, full of hope and excitement for the future. The Homeowners Association's agreement promised to take care of any property damage caused by natural occurrences, and the responsibility of maintaining the underlying ground. Living in an area prone to erosion, this assurance gave me a sense of security. My property was slightly elevated with a nearby lake, so I initially believed that maybe, just maybe, this homeowners associations would be different from the horror stories I had heard. The first year passed without incident, but then came a series of heavy rainfall. The signs of trouble began to appear. The land beyond my property started to crumble and collapse into the lake. Although it wasn't directly affecting my land, I alerted the homeowners associations, hoping they would address the issue. However, they remained unresponsive, and the erosion continued. With each subsequent rainfall, the erosion grew worse, encroaching dangerously close to the guardrail the homeowners associations had installed. It became evident that my own property was being neglected, with no ground treatment or maintenance provided. I reached out to the homeowners associations multiple times through letters and phone calls, but all I received were generic replies and empty promises. It was as if my concerns fell on deaf ears. As news of another impending rainstorm reached me, anxiety gripped my heart. I couldn't bear the thought of jeopardizing the safety of my family. Determined to protect them, I took time off work and made the decision to leave for a vacation to visit my parents and explore new sites. But before departing, I sent a final reminder to the homeowners associations about the approaching storm and the lack of care given to my land. Upon returning from our trip, my worst fears were realized. Half of my backyard had vanished, swallowed by the relentless erosion into the lake. The shed, my wife's beloved garden, and even my children's swing set had all been devoured by the voracious waters. Panic washed over me, not only because of the debris that now polluted the lake, but also due to the looming threat that my entire house could be claimed by the relentless erosion. Driven by anger and frustration, I directed my fury at the homeowners associations, holding them accountable for their negligence. This time, I reached out to a lawyer, determined to sue the homeowners associations for breaching the terms of our agreement. Suddenly, the homeowners associations was willing to engage in discussions, desperately trying to rectify the situation. They pleaded ignorance regarding the erosion and even argued that erosion did not constitute weather damage, despite its direct correlation. They attempted to offer me a paltry sum of $500, conveniently deducted from next year's membership dues. Their offer was an insult, and I made it clear that I would see them in court. Armed with a comprehensive trail of evidence, including the emails, phone messages, and the contract itself, I confronted the homeowners associations in the legal arena. Their lawyer stumbled through feeble excuses, claiming they were not responsible for my land's well-being, and citing non-existent loopholes. However, my lawyer astutely pointed out the explicit language in the contract, emphasizing the homeowners association's obligation to provide ground treatment to prevent erosion. It was undeniable proof that they were fully aware of the issue. The homeowners association's feeble attempts to evade responsibility crumbled under scrutiny. They tried to argue that I hadn't followed the correct channels of communication or lacked concrete evidence linking the erosion to the weather. But the judge saw through their feeble defenses and focused solely on the facts presented before him. In the end, justice prevailed. The homeowners associations was found guilty of gross negligence and ordered to pay me a staggering $360,000 in damages. It was a victory not just for me, but for every individual who had fallen victim to the homeowners associations' disregard for their obligations. Rumors began to circulate, exposing the homeowners associations' mismanagement and embezzlement of member dues. The aftermath of my lawsuit led to a wave of similar cases, with more people realizing the homeowners associations' misconduct and fighting back. The next one is a pro-revenge story. As we found out that we would be expecting not one, but 2 kids, we knew we had to move to a real house with more space. At the time, we were still living in a 1-bedroom studio 1 floor up from the ground floor. Its only entrance was a metal fire escape, stairs. Not ideal for a pregnant woman, let alone to live with 2 small babies. So we found a privately leased house that was newly renovated and had all the room and a large garden we were looking for. We signed the lease and immediately collected the keys. As the owner drove off, the woman next door came up to me, immediately demanding that we not make noise before noon as her boyfriend worked nights and slept in, and she had a whole list of other do's and don'ts. Right off the bat, we knew trouble was incoming. Since the house was fully renovated and not much had to be done, we decided not to poke the bear. We would do the things that made noise after noon. We moved in after 2 weeks and the whole street was warm and welcoming. My wife was almost due to give birth to my twin daughters, and some offered help with anything we needed. They were really kind people. They also told us about our neighbors. Nobody liked them. He was a big bully and got into arguments with everybody. They were also known as radio pirates, meaning they illegally broadcasted on the radio with all Dutch bangers. Their parties went on from Thursday to Sunday until 5 in the morning. Loud music, constant yelling, always drunken, etc. It was really something to look forward to when moving in, especially with 2 babies on the way. The partying began immediately, full blast. Quite classy for someone who demanded quiet when the douchebag needed his beauty sleep. Then one day, my father-in-law came to put new grass in. He parked his trailer at the back of our houses, which is public space. Not according to him, though. That exact spot where the trailer, full of grass sods, quite heavy stuff, was parked was his spot, and he demanded that we move the trailer. I wasn't going to do that, as I didn't plan to walk all the way around the house with the sods. He got angry right away, and demanded that I move it. I told him to go screw himself. I was done with him already. I'm also a ginger, so besides having no soul, I do have a temper, which is always in check until you repeatedly provoke me. Anyone who knows me will tell you that you really had to make an effort for that to happen. We went on working, and at the end of the day, my father-in-law wanted to leave. He hooked up the trailer, and there was the douchebag, telling him off, yelling that it was his spot and he better not do it again or else. Mess with me all you want, I can handle it. But what you don't do is threaten my family. I ran outside and told him in no uncertain terms to back off or he'd be the sorry one. Total bluff on my side? Yes, I have that temper, but I'm not impressively built and have no hidden fighting skills. I do fight dirty. He backed off, my father-in-law left, and I went inside where I found my wife crying. She was scared that he might do something to her father or me, and we didn't need that right now. Combined with hormones from being pregnant, you can imagine the picture. I was even more pissed off, but had to promise not to act on anything. I won't, dear. Not yet, anyway. Time went on without any real incidents, and then the time came when my wife went into labor. It didn't go smoothly, and she ended up having to deliver via C-section because our second daughter was almost strangled by the umbilical cord. We had to stay 3 nights, and they were excruciating nights for a lot of reasons. Finally, we got to go home, and our family had put a giant sign in our front yard welcoming the babies. The sign had already been up for a few days prior to our return, so our friendly neighbors definitely knew about it. But did they give a flying duck? No, they did not. From the first night on, they started partying and blasting their terrible music. They started at noon and continued until 5 or 6 in the morning. Classy. They kept it up for days, so it wasn't just Thursday to Sunday. It was all week long and into the next. We were broken, hardly slept. One of our daughters suffered from heavy cramps combined with all the noise, and her parents were at the end of their wits, so she cried a lot. And then I had just had it. I researched some things about radio pirates, the laws and regulations, and his large antenna, 5 meters or more, in his backyard, which was illegal in itself. But he used it to illegally broadcast on the radio, which meant he had a lot of equipment to do so, which was even more illegal, and could even get him jailed. At the very least, they could seize it all and fine him big time, somewhere in the range of 10,000 to 45,000 euros. Now, I didn't immediately turn him in, but instead looked for another house to lease first. This was because I figured it wouldn't sit well with him, and having a wife and 2 babies alone in the house during the day while I had to go to work was risky. I hear you guys thinking, why not involve the police? Well, they are utterly useless in cases like this. We called once, and what they did disturbs me to this day. They rang their doorbell and immediately started off by saying we called them about noise complaints. Yes, you read that right. No protection or anything. Just blatantly told them we were the reason they were there, told them to keep it down, and that was it. They didn't even follow up with us or anything. As you can guess, the douchebag was even more pissed off and told me the next day, or yelled over the fence that separates our backyards, that I really should not do that again. It was a threat yet again of which I told the police. I didn't report it the first time as I chalked it up to alpha male behavior and the heat of the moment. But without witnesses to corroborate, nothing could be done yet again. Some days later, I walked out the front door and he just stepped out of his car. He came up to me demanding that I cut back some of our ivy that grew on our side of the fence because it was tangled with his big-ass antenna. He said he would be gone for a few hours, and I could come into his garden to cut back the ivy that had grown through to their side. And then a light bulb went off in my head. I told him politely that I would do that immediately. Why? Because that gave me the opportunity to find out the make and model of his antenna to ascertain its signal strength, where the cables went exactly and what kind of cables they were. I also wanted to get a good view of the equipment he had through the window so I could take some photographs of it. This was the icing on the cake. Meanwhile, we had managed to find a new home, and we had already signed the lease, so we would be gone in 2 weeks. Luckily, we only had to paint the girls' room and pack up our things to move them to the other house. After I trimmed the ivy and collected my evidence, I went online that night to find out the proper channels to report a broadcast pirate and which entity was tasked with catching said pirate. It turned out I had to call the telecom agency, but also the police. I wasn't too happy about involving the police, but I remembered I have a nephew who works for the police. Officially, his area was immigration, but he knew enough colleagues who could help us and whom we could trust not to confront them again, saying I was the one who sent them. That was extremely important for our safety in doing what I was about to do, so I gave both the agency and the police all the evidence I had collected and pointed them to the frequencies he pirated so they could listen in. Then they started a neighborhood investigation, which wasn't really necessary. But we wanted to cover our bases and make it look like he got caught by accident, because they had an active investigation in our area. You never know what he could learn from legal documents and such. We asked them to wait with the raid. Yes, they raid pirate houses, preferably in the early hours of the day when he's asleep, rendering him incapable of fleeing or hiding evidence, etc. We moved 2 weeks later, and they raided his house 2 days after we moved. All of his equipment, computers, radios, cell phones, and his car were seized. He left in handcuffs, and his wife-girlfriend did too for making a big scene and trying to interfere. All of this was live reported to me by one of my former neighbors who were equally ecstatic about this. It turned out this wasn't the first time he got caught, but his 3rd time. His car had no insurance, and it failed its MOT. This would normally have no significant consequences because he didn't drive it while it was raided. But they had been surveilling him for a week and saw him driving it without insurance and a valid MOT. He was fined somewhere around 30,000 euros, went to jail for 12 weeks, and everything that was seized was destroyed except the car. His girlfriend had to do 40 or so hours of community service. They had to sell the house, which made the other neighbors very happy as they were also done with them. Like I said, I do fight, but very dirty. You really have to make an effort to push me to that point. They did, and they suffered. Over a year later, while shopping for groceries, I encountered them. They gave me the foulest looks. If looks could kill, I'd be a smoldering heap of ash. But it ended there, nothing more than that. Wow, folks. I'm kind of surprised by all the appreciation. Gold and silver awards, wholesome, masterpiece, helpful, bravo grande, and so many upvotes. Thank you all, kind people. I honestly don't know what I can do with gold or silver, but I promise you I'll spend it by giving back. This difficult period in our lives has turned into something better this way. The next one is a petty revenge story. Neighbor's son, Garth, graduated from college about this time last year and got his first full-time career job at a company. He's in the IT department of a branch office and handles IT tasks. The total number of employees at this office is around 20, with some in sales and others working in the office. Karen is the office manager. When Garth first started, there were 3 IT people who had an office in the basement, away from the rest of the employees. This arrangement suited Garth just fine. He's a quiet, introverted young man. He's highly intelligent but not very social, preferring to spend his time off gaming rather than engaging in live interactions. As you can imagine, he's not a big guy, maybe $1.50 after eating a big steak for dinner. The other 2 IT people eventually moved on to other jobs, but the company didn't replace them. Now Garth has 3 times the workload without receiving a raise. Garth voiced his concerns about the workload and call-outs to Karen, but he received the standard feeble corporate responses and a condescending lecture. I don't know why he didn't quit then, but he stuck it out, hoping to eventually be recognized for his worth, etc. Whenever I spoke with him, he would mention how bad it was working for Karen, but his saving grace was that he was in his solitary office most of the day and didn't have to have much contact with her. Until one day back in February when he received a phone call from Karen telling him to come upstairs. Upon arriving, he was directed to start moving furniture around. Garth took a look around and told Karen that his job does not involve moving heavy objects. Karen got loud and questioned his manhood in front of everyone, but Garth didn't budge. Life changed for Garth after that. Karen had decided to make work miserable for him. She started repeatedly writing him up for whatever she could think of. Here comes the petty revenge. Garth started snooping and discovered that Karen is having an affair with a married coworker. Their work phones are synced up to the computer system, which Garth has access to. Garth created a mass corporate email with various screenshots of their sexting. He rigged it to be sent out today from her own email account. The beauty of it all, Garth walked in on Friday and tendered his resignation to corporate HR. He left his ID card and whatever else on Karen's desk. Karen made a big deal of shouting at Garth as he was leaving, "Don't let the door hit you in the ass on the way out!" When the email is sent out, they may well suspect that Garth was the perpetrator, but they'll never be able to prove it. I can only hope Garth's revenge is sweet and spectacular. The next one is a malicious compliance story. This happened in Sweden about 40 years ago, and even if my memories may be a bit hazy, the gist of the story is absolutely true, even if the details are a bit off. I had bought an old clunker of a car to get to my new job, and when I say clunker, that is being nice. It was mainly held together by gaffa tape, and it cost me a whopping $100. Kind of temporary until I got my first paycheck. On my way home, one of the few police cars in my small town, approximately 25K, pulled me over, which was indeed understandable as it was around midnight and the car being what it was. But it was actually roadworthy, and their issue was with the road tax. They said it was unpaid and that it was illegal to drive the car. However, they knew who I was because my dad was the district court judge, so they allowed me to drive home while following me, so I'd actually go home, I guess. I complied, of course. When I parked outside our house, they said they had to take the plates off the car, and that I could pay the tax the next day, go to the station, show the receipt, and get the plates back. Fine, I said. They started rummaging in the trunk of their car, and discovered someone had pilfered their toolbox. I offered them to take the keys instead, but nah. They asked if I had a screwdriver in my car, and I said no, had just bought it. I started to talk about other options, but the boss cop told me to just go sit in the car and stay quiet. Not another word from you, little missy kind of attitude. I complied, of course. I was just about to say I could fetch a screwdriver from the tool shed, but they weren't interested in that. I do think they were worried that I'd wake the judge. Oh, horror. Or not. So they opted to call the one other car they had roaming the town that night. A K9 unit. And that got noisy. We lived near the park, so of course those cops figured it was an opportunity to let the dogs stretch their legs. Sigh. Well, I obeyed orders, sat there, was quiet. They were not. First, my father came out in his robe and slippers, looking slightly frazzled and confused. Not exactly someone to be afraid of, but I just sat there as instructed, because I knew what would come next. My mother. What are you doing with my daughter? Well, it went downhill from there. Don't think my dad said a word, but my mom certainly ripped them a new one and got kind of famous on our street the next few days. Could have been a very quiet and nice interaction here, but, well, they wanted to make a big deal about the missing tax payment, so a big deal they got. For 10 cents. Simple typo. The next one is an entitled People Story. Something bizarre happened to me yesterday. I was pulling into a parking lot when the car in front of me suddenly came to a complete stop in the middle of the lane. Its owner, an older white man, turned it off, got out, and started walking into the nearest store in the strip mall. He just parked his car in the middle of the lane. I could have gotten around it if I really tried, but it would be dangerously close to either his car or other parked cars. I lightly tapped my horn twice at him, seeing as how I was essentially stuck now. He turned around and I rolled my window down and said to him, "That's not a parking space." He dramatically pointed at my car and then did this right this way motion with both hands, sort of aiming at the very narrow path that I guess he thought I should be able to get through. I repeated myself again, "Sir, that's not a parking space. I can't get around you." Him, "Why is it that one of you people every time just go around?" "So he's done this before?" Me, "Sir, what are you doing? That's not a parking space. I need you to move." Him, "I need you to mind your own business." Me, "Come on, you can't park there. Please just move your car." At this point, his lips were doing that weird shake that old people do when they hang their mouths open. I guess he thought he was being intimidating. He stepped up to my window and yelled, "Him, you want to make me?" Okay, so he's done this before and he's being an aggressive jerk. Now I've read on here where other people have interacted with older Karens, and there's apparently a card that you can play that bypasses this sort of attitude. Me, "Sir, are you okay? Do you know where you are?" Him, "What?" Me, "Are you with someone? Is there someone who's supposed to be helping you today?" Him, "What are you?" Me, "Do you need help? It sounds like you don't know where you are, and I'm worried for you. Is there anyone I can call for you to help you?" I think he caught on to me at this point, because he switched back from confused to being angry again. Him, "I don't know. Is there anyone I can call for you? Is that somehow a threat?" I don't, Tico. Me, "Sir, it's okay, don't worry. You just stay right there and I'll call someone who can come help you. Don't worry, it'll be okay. Just don't move and I'll call for an ambulance." At this point, I backed into a parking space that had opened behind me and pulled out my phone. I really was going to call cops, but only because he was too confrontational to be left unattended in public. Of course, as with most bullies, the moment they realize they don't have power over you, he gave up, muttered something, got back in his car, and left. On my way out of the lot, I saw that he had miraculously found his way into a parking spot on the other side of the lot.
The next one is an entitled People Story.
It feels surreal to finally share my story after 6 long years of enduring the tyranny of a homeowners association. The relentless pursuit for justice, the destruction of my property, and the incessant demands to pay homeowners association fees have all culminated in a dramatic and thrilling conclusion. Now, with the dust settled, I can proudly say that I have emerged victorious, standing tall against the homeowners association. To understand the full extent of this battle, we must rewind further back to when the Homeowners Association was first established. In my neighborhood, the Homeowners Association was optional for existing residents, but newcomers were automatically enrolled. Being one of the few holdouts, I staunchly refused to join, dismissing their persistent requests as mere junk mail. I had no interest in becoming entangled in their restrictive regulations. In their desperation to enforce their authority, the Homeowners Association created a group of self-proclaimed officers, individuals who wielded power without any legitimate authority. These officers began tormenting me, demanding payment for Homeowners Association fees despite my non-membership. Their actions escalated from mere annoyance to outright destruction when they raided my property, tearing up my lawn, vandalizing my windows, and subjecting me to sleepless nights of incessant doorbell ringing. Fearful yet resolved, I attempted to involve the police, but the officers always managed to elude capture, exploiting their self-imposed vigilante status. Fed up with their illegal activities, I sought legal representation and initiated a lawsuit against the Homeowners Association. To strengthen my case, my lawyer advised installing video cameras to document the ongoing harassment. Throughout the arduous 6-year legal battle, numerous hurdles complicated the proceedings. Debates arose regarding my ability to sue the Homeowners Association as a non-member, which threatened to prolong the case indefinitely. Meanwhile, the emergence of the pandemic further delayed the legal process, leaving me vulnerable to continued harassment, while justice eluded me. However, as life gradually returned to normalcy, I finally gained momentum in my lawsuit against the Homeowners Association. Unbeknownst to them, I possessed irrefutable evidence of their actions, captured on video. In court, their faces turned ashen when confronted with the undeniable proof of their wrongdoing. Their futile attempts to discredit the videos by claiming lack of consent to record on my own property fell flat, as the law unequivocally supported my right to protect my personal domain. Ultimately, the Homeowners Association was found guilty of harassment, but it was the extensive property damage that served as the focal point of my lawsuit. Years of destruction had taken their toll, discouraging me from repairing the damages, knowing they would be targeted once more. The Homeowners Association, realizing the weight of their misdeeds, reluctantly ceased their arguments, fully aware that their defeat was imminent. Now, 6 years since the ordeal began, the final court decision has been rendered. The Homeowners Association is ordered to pay me a staggering $200,000 in restitution for their relentless harassment and property destruction. Any future interference in my life, including sending solicitations to join the Homeowners Association, would result in additional fines. Moreover, an independent investigation has been initiated to scrutinize the Homeowners Association's officer program, potentially exposing further violations of local laws governing homeowners associations. While the financial compensation is indeed significant, I find myself more exhausted than celebratory. This prolonged battle has drained me, leaving behind a sense of weariness rather than triumph. I can only hope that the Homeowners Association's officer program is dismantled, ushering in a new era where residents are no longer subjected to unwarranted harassment. Although I had hoped for the dissolution of the Homeowners Association itself, I am heartened by the fact that others, inspired by my victory, have come forward to challenge the Homeowners Association's authority, hiring their own legal representation to seek emancipation. The next one is a pro-revenge story. This story isn't about me, but my dear old dad. Back in the day, he used to be a plumber. He then went on to join the military, where he sustained various injuries and chemical exposure. Anyway, this happened during the time when he was fighting for his disability. On occasion, he would do side jobs just to get by. It was very painful and difficult work for him, but alas, the bills needed to be paid. At the time, he had a neighbor up the road who needed some pretty serious work done in his home, and offered to pay my dad a bit over $3,000 for the labor. To be frank, $3,000 was a bit on the low end for the work, but my dad figured, hey, help a neighbor out, and he really needed to make some extra cash. The holidays were coming up, a little over 2 months before Christmas. The guy buys the supplies, my dad does the labor, with promises that he'll be paid when it is finished. You already know where this is going. Surprise, surprise, the work gets finished, but the guy doesn't pay up. Not only does this guy not pay my dad, but he has the gall to laugh at my dad, and ask him what he's going to do about it since the work was under the table. Neighbor be damned. Oh, was he, my dad, ever pissed. I remember when he flat out told me, that son of an idiot might not ever pay me, but he's going to be paying someone that $3,000, just you watch, sweets. And he got to work. He couldn't spend a lot of time on his feet, but he had quite a few hours to kill, and he started planning this dude's comeuppance. He went to the store and bought a bunch of jacks, the kind that come in the game of jacks, with the rubber ball and whatnot. He then proceeded to spend the next couple of weeks sharpening them up and making the ends into little spikes. Every time he would drive by this guy's house, he'd casually toss a handful out the window into this guy's driveway. You can imagine this guy was constantly getting flat tires and had to continuously repair and replace them. Fast forward to Christmas Day, my dad calls me up, cackling hysterically, so I ask him what's up. This is actually one of my favorite memories of him. He tells me, remember that neighbor? The one that ducked me over? Well, I just drove by his house, and he, the wife, and the kids are all dressed up for church, standing in the front yard by their car, and it's got a couple flats. You see, I think he wised up because he started parking in the grass, but the mother ducker didn't know I threw them in the yard too. I love my dad. The next one is a petty revenge story. I, 35M, have a younger brother, Todd, 29M, who had a complicated birth and had to stay a month in the ICU. Because of this, my parents have always doted on him and denied him nothing, even if it was to the detriment of my sister Abby, 32F, and me. Todd revels in the attention and has on more than one occasion made himself the center of attention at either my my sister's, or a cousin's special event. Because of this, Abby and I have a strained relationship with Todd and our parents. Unfortunately, Todd met and fell in love with Lucy, 24F, who announced her own pregnancy at the baby shower my mom held for Abby. When I proposed to my wife, Michelle, 30F, I initially wanted to elope. However, she really wanted her family to be there. So I invited my family out of obligation. While out, my best man, Jim, 35M, noticed a receipt from a jewelry store that slipped out of Todd's pocket. Jim confronted Todd about this, which led to an argument. Jim told me everything, and I informed Todd that he would no longer be a groomsman because I knew he was going to propose at my wedding. Todd cried to our parents, resulting in a blowout. In my parents' eyes, since Todd never admitted that he planned to propose to Lucy at my wedding, they believed I was unfairly judging him. I refused and brought up Todd's past behavior. My parents couldn't refute this and convinced Todd not to attempt anything at my wedding. However, this wasn't enough to convince me to let him be a groomsman. I warned him that if he tried anything as a guest, he would regret it. Fast forward to the wedding, and unsurprisingly, Todd walked over to Lucy and proposed to her during Michelle's father-daughter dance, making sure everyone noticed. That's when my revenge took place. Jim and I had hired a woman to pretend to be Todd's lover. She cornered Todd and Lucy, claiming to be pregnant with his baby. Todd denied it, but when she called his phone, I provided her with his number and tampered with Todd's phone to incriminate him. It didn't look good for him. Lucy threw the ring back at Todd and left in tears. When Todd saw the smile on my face, he knew it was me. I didn't respond to a single call or text from him or my parents until after the honeymoon. Lucy has thrown Todd's belongings out and is denying him access to their child. Todd is furious and demands that I clear his name. I sent him a text saying I had no idea what he was talking about, along with a screenshot of the wedding bill. I also vaguely demanded reimbursement for half of the wedding costs. Michelle knew the whole time what I was planning and gave me the green light after Todd ruined her moment with her dad. I felt pretty good, but now even Abby thinks I went too far. The next one is a malicious compliance story. A little background info. I live in a popular tropical tourist destination, and one of my jobs is as crew on a snorkel boat. I set up the boat before the trip, lifeguard, give history about the area, etc. My captain is also the owner of the business, so what he says goes, and he knows the local waters like the back of his hand. Our company consists of him, me, and his girlfriend who manages bookings, phones, and emails. We aren't low quality, but we don't offer full meals or entertainment on board and focus solely on the snorkel experience. Because of that, compared to the larger boats, our private charters are lower cost than most competition. In turn, we often get penny pincher people. Onward to the main story. A family of 22 had been hounding our office before they even arrived at our location, according to our office. They were pushy and trying to get discounts and free upgrades, so I was already dreading this charter. Generally, we take a card number and charge it before the charter, but this group was adamant about paying cash. The office and captain said fine, but told me to get payment before getting them on the boat. Our boat is 55 feet long and stays moored offshore a few hundred yards, so we use a water taxi to ferry from the shore to the boat. I got dropped off to get payment, check the group in, and give them pre-boarding info. I walked up to the main guy paying for everything to start the process, and that's when things went downhill. M = me, G = guy. G: hello, which boat are we going on? M points to our boat. That pretty one right there. G: that's not the boat we are going on. M: yes it is. There isn't any other boat, sir. G: no, the boat looks like this. Shows me a photo of the boat from our website. M: yes, sir, that is the same boat. We just had the bottom and paint replaced a month ago. I guess our office hasn't updated our website. Sorry about the confusion, but I assure you it is the exact same boat. G: well, I don't think you're trying to deceive me, but then why would they send me that photo? M: I'm sorry, I'm not sure what to tell you. It is the same boat. G: well, I think we need to go out and inspect it and look at it before we decide to go and pay for it. M: I'm sorry, sir, that's not how this works. We've already set up the boat for the charter and blocked any other bookings to accommodate your private charter. You can pay and we can take your family out for their excursion, or you can decide not to go. We haven't received payment from you, so we have no obligation to you and no money to return. What would you like to do? G: then we don't want to go on the boat. M: okay, sir, sorry it didn't work out. You and your family have a good day. I picked up my stuff, turned around, got in the water taxi, and left them on the shore. As we rode away, I could see the guy already on the phone trying to call the office. I called his bluff, and he was panicking because his whole family just heard him say they didn't want to go, even though many of them did. I got back to the boat and explained to the captain what happened. He said it sounds like he doesn't want them on his boat anyway, and it's their loss. We had planned to refuel after their trip, but decided to do it now since we now had the morning open. They were still on the shore when we left, but were gone when we got back. Once back on shore, the other guys who run activities in the same area told us the group had hung around for about an hour. I guess the guy was very convinced we would come crawling back, but when we didn't, the family started fighting since many of them still wanted to go. Now they have to try to find another boat that has 22 spaces open and will most likely cost 3 times more than us. It was totally worth waking up early without pay. The next one is an entitled People Story. I live on a dirt road, and while I own it, 3 other families have the right to drive on it to access their properties. All good. Where the road curves over time, gravel has built up well off the road and visually made that portion look like an abandoned parking lot. A sad sight next to my forest of trees and our sparkling river. In the blazing heat of August, I toiled. I scraped up the gravel, watered, to force more gravel up to the surface, scraped, hauled, raked, and sweated. My neighbors shook their collective heads as they saw me working. 3 dump trucks of soil arrived, raking, smoothing, and finally joyful planting. A small flowering tree, hundreds of lily bulbs, daffodils, grass seed bushes have replaced the gravel wasteland. Now my phone rings. Mr. Wonderful, the neighbor at the end of the road, wants to talk to me. We meet at my work site. He wants me to explain what I am doing. Fine, I explain. He tells me my work is a waste of time. Fine, I'm okay with trying. He informs me that the whole community uses that area as a turnaround. The whole community is him. No one else would ever need to use it. I am still okay. I tell him that if he needs to drive on my grass a bit to turn his boat around, I am okay with that. He asks why I did not tell him what my plans were. I come up with some version of what? Why would I check with you about planting grass on my yard? And oh, by the way, you have driven past me doing this work for days. If you were so interested, you could have asked. But now you know I am planting grass. The mask dissolves. His 6+ self hops off his golf cart and growls, "No, I am going to tell you what you are going to do." Mr. Wonderful informs me that the land is not legally mine as he is claiming it through adverse possession. I laughed. I am 5'1" and was totally terrified inside, but I am not going to cede an inch. Towering over me with spit flying, he screams that I can expect to be in court facing a judge because he is not giving me his property. And the threats keep coming. By now, other neighbors have come over to witness the fuss. He keeps at it. When he stops for a breath, I say to everyone, "I am so glad you are all here. I am planting grass on my property. If you are called to court to testify, please do not worry about offending me. I will not be angry. And regardless of the outcome of the case, if any of you need to encroach on the grass to turn vehicles around, you have my full permission. Except for you, Mr. Wonderful. You are never to touch my property." The next one is an entitled Parent Story. So a bit of backstory. I'm a 28-year-old woman who recently went fully blind. When I was a teenager, I volunteered with my local youth group to help rebuild Mississippi after Hurricane Katrina. While I was down there, I picked up a fungal parasite called histoplasmosis that migrated to my eyes over a decade and slowly caused blindness. I've been totally blind for about a year now, so I'm pretty new to it, but I digress. When I first went blind, I barely left the house and was afraid to go in public. I felt like everyone was staring at me, and honestly, I barely knew what I was doing. The transition had been difficult, and I didn't have any support group to teach me. One day, my husband asks if I can take an Uber down to the bank and deposit a rent check, and I reluctantly agree. While I'm out, he messages again and reminds me that we're out of a few crucial groceries. There was a Walmart grocery store literally across the street from the bank, so I figure everything in life is an experience, and I'll have to learn how to shop alone eventually. So why not? Everything was fine at first, and I was only grabbing a few things, so I didn't need a cart. I was using my cane and what little echolocation skills I had at the time to get around, but I was still bumping into things as we blind tend to do sometimes. My cane suddenly hit something a bit softer, and I figure maybe I had whacked someone's leg and apologize. Cue entitled kid, EK, and entitled mother, EM. Me. Shoot, I'm sorry. EM. Hey, you just hit my son. Me. I'm so sorry, ma'am, I didn't see him there. EM begins yelling, "How could you not see him? He's clearly right here." Now I'm fully blind, but I don't wear sunglasses. Mostly because I can't afford a good UV blocking pair. But also, I'm not ever looking for pity or to play the part of a generic blind person. I just want to be treated like a normal person. But I do understand her confusion as blindness is a spectrum, so I try to calmly explain. Me. Ma'am, I'm blind. I can't see anything, let alone your son. That's why I have to use the cane so I can get around without. She cuts me off. If you're blind, why aren't you wearing big sunglasses? Now, as a blind person, I get a lot of stupid questions. But I understand that many of them come from people who don't know better, so I try to happily answer as many as I can. Me. Those are really expensive. Around $200 for a good pair, and I really don't need them inside. EM. You're not blind, you're faking it. Here is where my blood starts to boil. I can't think of any reason someone would want to pretend to be blind. It's an actual hell, and nothing pisses me off more than when someone calls me a liar when I'm not. Just as I'm about to respond, I feel a tug, and before I blink, I realize this little demon spawn has snatched my $100 cane from my hands. For those of you who don't understand, that's like if you're shopping, and suddenly the power goes out and you can't see a single light. Without my cane, I can barely move at all without crashing into anything. My voice gets shaky as I begin to panic. Please give that back, I really do need it. M. No, you don't, you liar. My son deserves to play with this more than you. I hear her shuffle away, and my expensive cane cracking into metal displays and such as they leave. I start crying and waving my arms in front of me to grab onto something, anything, and end up crashing and falling into a center aisle display, making a loud scene. Without fail, I somewhat curl into a ball and cry. I'm alone in public, in the dark, and I have no idea what to do. Suddenly, I feel a hand on my shoulder and a man's voice, we'll call him AG for awesome guy, asks if I'm okay and tells me to stay right here. I do, but begin to at least sit up and listen. This man must have been tall and built like a tank because his footsteps sounded like a giant's, and I felt a suction of wind when he took off. Maybe about 30 or 40 feet away, I hear this loud bellowing like an angry lion and a loud crash. Then, before I know it, the man is back and helping me to my feet. He takes my hand and puts my cane into my palm and helps me pick up the items I dropped when I fell into the display. Me, wiping tears from my cheeks. Thank you so much. I didn't know how to handle that. AG. Don't worry about it. Some people are just monsters. This guy restored my faith in humanity and even helped me finish shopping and get out of the store. As we're leaving, I can hear the familiar screeching of EM, something about AG grabbing the cane and pulling hard, flinging her little devil child into a shopping cart. I don't know if she was exaggerating or not, but it would explain the crash I heard. It's easy to feel alone in a world without sight, but even through the sheer terror of being stripped of my cane, at least I know now that there are people willing to stand up for me when I need it. The next one is an entitled parent's story. I'm allergic to fish and seafood. It's not the anaphylactic type of allergy, thank goodness, so I'm not going to die if I eat some, but I do throw up, have a stomach ache, and get a massive headache for a few hours. If I consume enough fish or seafood, I break out in small red hives over my arms. My mother didn't believe it, and as a child I couldn't stand up to her properly. She would force me to eat dishes with seafood or fish in them to prove I wasn't allergic, and then ignore me when I got sick. One day she held a dinner party. I was dressed up beautifully and brought out to parade before the guests. At the time, I was around 9 years old, precocious for my age, and absolutely fed up with my mother making me sick. When she held out a fish cutlet, fish cooked with vegetables rolled into a ball covered in batter and fried, for me to eat, I saw my chance. Me loudly. I can't eat that, I'm allergic to fish. Mother. No, you're not, eat it. Me. I am allergic, I'll throw up. No Asian mother will back down in front of guests for fear of looking like she can't discipline her child. My mother grabbed the fish cutlet, shoved it in my mouth, and said in her most firm voice of command, "Eat," so I ate it. Cut to about 10 minutes later. I went up to my mother and tugged on her sorry to get attention. Me. I don't feel well. Barf. I vomited on her on the expensive carpet and in full view of all the guests. My mother has a reputation for being a kind, generous, charitable, and very religious woman. So in front of all the guests, she couldn't do anything except act sympathetic and send me off to bed to recover. She never made me eat fish or seafood again. My daffodils came up this spring, the lilies are sprouting, and no court summons has arrived. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.